So now that we know what the meta build is for the MP40, it's about time we actually compare it fully to some of the other popular SMGs inside Warzone. So we're going to be comparing it to the MP5 from Modern Warfare, as well as the MP5 from Cold War. If you enjoy weapon stat breakdowns, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we try to reach our goal of 50k subscribers, and also click that link in the description down below and subscribe to our second channel as well. Now, like I said, we're going to be comparing all three of these weapons, and we're going to be comparing the main builds for these guns. So let's quickly go over the actual builds themselves. So for the Modern Warfare MP5, we're using this build right here. We're not using the underbarrel, and that's because the Merc foregrip doesn't really help all that much more than just the 5mm laser by itself, but it also does slow you down in terms of movement speeds overall, so you don't really want that. It also slows down your aim down sight speed. So you actually rather go for something like the stipple grip tape, or you can go for sleight of hand instead, which is actually a really good option in my opinion. For the Cold War MP5, went for this build right here, which is the agency suppressor build. You do need the agency suppressor on the Cold War MP5, and that's because it has that vertical recoil, which we'll show you later in this video. And then the only thing we switched out is we usually use the SCS Combat or the Raider stocks for the faster strafing speeds, but because they nerfed it by over 60%, we'd rather have a slightly faster sprint to fire time, so we're using the collapse stock instead, and it gives you no cons, but the rest of the build is pretty much identical. And lastly, here's the build for the MP40, so if you do want to use it, it's the recoil booster with the longest barrel, then we've got the folding stock, the steady perk, we've got quick, we've got the grooved grip, and we've got the Grenko 45 round mag. So we've actually tested the damage for these specific mags with the hollow point rounds and the Carver foregrip. This is probably the main build that most of the pros are using right now. They might swap out the Carver foregrip for certain attachments, but the main ones are the hollow point rounds, the 45 round mags, the barrel, and the recoil booster. So moving on into the damage stats, this is probably the most important stats everyone wants to know about, and like I said, this is with these specific builds. So for the MP40s, all those attachments stacked together, and we did do testing individually on each one of these weapons once again, just to make sure nothing has changed since the last time we tested the MP5s from Modern Warfare and Cold War as well. And we took the rate of fire, which is an important stat, the headshot damage, the chest shot damage, the chest TTK, a one headshot plus the rest of the shots to the chest TTK as well. So for the MP40, as you can see in the first damage range and obviously in the second damage range, the rate of fire is 811 rounds per minute. For the Cold War MP5 is 868 rounds per minute, and for the Modern Warfare MP5, this is the one that actually got the nerf, it's 765 rounds per minute. Now for the headshot damage, you can see that the MP40 starts at 45, goes down to 36, and that is with the 45 Grenko mags and the hollow point ammo. And then you can see for the Cold War MP5, it starts at 44, goes down to 34 in the second damage range. For the Modern Warfare MP5, it starts at 44 and goes down to 36 in the second damage range. For chest shot damage on the MP40, it's 33, goes down to 25. Cold War MP5 starts at 31, goes down to 24. Modern Warfare MP5 starts at 34, goes down to 27. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the chest shot TTK, which is probably the most important stat when it comes to SMGs, especially at close range. So we're looking at mainly within that first damage range. We're looking at the TTKs. So for the MP40, with the hollow point ammo as well as those Grenko mags, you get a 518 millisecond TTK. For the Cold War MP5 is actually slightly quicker at 484 milliseconds of a TTK. So even though you stack all those attachments together, the Cold War MP5 still comes out on top in terms of just raw time to kill. And then the Modern Warfare MP5 is a little bit slower at 549 milliseconds TTK. So as you can see, the Modern Warfare MP5 is the slowest. And then when it comes to landing one headshot with the rest chest shots, you can see the TTKs don't really change across the board. Moving on to some really important stats as well, especially for SMGs, is the movement or handling stats. Now, movement and handling stats are really important. So let's take a look at the MP40's reload time, which is 2.2 seconds. Cold War MP5's 2.6 seconds. Modern Warfare MP5 is the quickest at 2 seconds. So as you can see, overall across the board, the reload times are pretty good because they are SMGs. They are not too bad, but you can put sleight of hand on the Modern Warfare MP5, and you can put sleight of hand on the MP40 as well and get slightly quicker reload times if you need to. And you can also get fast mags for the MP5 if you really wanted, but that will also con your ADS time. Now, when it comes to firing strafing speeds, this is really important to note that most of the Vanguard weapons will always come out on top in this area, and that is because they did nerf all of the Cold War Raider stocks and the SAS combat stocks, and that is where most of the strafing was coming from when it comes to the Cold War weapons. Modern Warfare weapons didn't really strafe good all that much anyway, but now they're actually slightly quicker than some of the Cold War weapons. Now, not all of the Cold War weapons, because if you do use the Task Force barrel still, you'll get a slightly faster strafe speed, but on the Cold War MP5, it doesn't really make sense to use that barrel because you're going to get tons of extra recoil. So as it stands with the current builds, you are going to get a much quicker strafing speed with the MP40 than you would with the build we use for the Cold War MP5 or the Modern Warfare MP5. Aim down sight times are pretty straightforward as well. The Modern Warfare gun does come out on top, but again, across the board, all of these weapons are very similar in terms of aim down sight time. It's not really going to be the make or break on you winning a gunfight with the kind of differences that you have with these weapons. Now, when it comes to sprint to fire time, again, the Modern Warfare gun comes out on top as well. In this case, it is a bit of a significant difference if you compare it to the MP40, for example. It's almost half the amount of time, roughly. So you can get a significantly reduced sprint to fire time with a Modern Warfare gun, so hip firing is going to be a lot smoother and a lot better with a Modern Warfare weapon. So here's where stuff actually gets quite interesting when we take a look at the actual recoil patterns of all these weapons. We've got all three of these MP weapons, if you want to call them, right here, and we're going to actually test the recoil at a 10 meter distance. So you can see that pinged on the wall just there. We'll test the Modern Warfare MP5 first because we all know how this weapon fires by now. We've seen it for quite a long while now, and we fired a full mag into the wall, and as you can see, there's a bit of side-to-side recoil, but for the most part it goes upwards and to the right. Now we're going to test the Cold War MP5, and we all know that this one goes straight vertical and then it stops at a certain point. Now, that travel time, or the speed of the recoil of that, is actually quite hard to control, but let's take a look at the MP40 as well just quickly, and then we'll do a kind of controlled recoil as well. So this is the MP40 right here. As you can see, it just goes up and to the right very accurately, might I add. So there's not a lot of side to side bounce at all with this recoil pattern. So as you can see, but in actual fact, when you're trying to control the recoil of these weapons in particular, Cold War MP5 actually comes out the worst. So we'll try and control the MP40 first. It's very straightforward. Pull down and to the left a little bit. You can get this gun to be an absolute laser beam if with a little bit of practice. We'll try the Cold War MP5 and we'll try and just pulling down. That's all we need to do. And once it gets to that point where it actually stops, you kind of find yourself overcompensating for the recoil a bit too much. So if you haven't killed someone within the first 20 bullets or so, you end up shooting all the way down again, which is a bit annoying sometimes. And then we'll do it with the Modern Warfare MP5. So we're pulling down to the left once again. And as you can see, there's a lot of side-to-side bounce with this one. At close range, you probably won't really notice it all that much, but compared to how accurate the MP40 is, this could be pretty much a long-range gun. We could also talk about hipfire accuracy as well, but these are not like hipfire builds for these guns. You could kit these builds out completely differently, just make them for hipfire only, and it would work really well for pretty much all three. But like I said, that is all I wanted to talk about. But what we're going to do now is rank them in terms of which ones I think are the best in order. So of course, in first place, I do think the MP40 is the best. The TTK is not the best out of the bunch, but it's in between. The movement speeds are the fastest, and let's be completely honest, the Vanguard weapons will be the meta in this game now. At number 2, I'm going to give it to the Modern Warfare MP5. It's got the slowest TTK out of the bunch, but the recoil is still manageable to an extent anyway, especially at close range. It's also got probably the best hipfire out of all of these options, and on top of that, most people will have this leveled up fully. And of course, at last place, we have the Cold War MP5. The recoil is just very hard to manage on this weapon. Now, if you do have aim assist, it is a little bit easier in my personal opinion, and you could also build this gun to have better recoil control by using the Field Agent foregrip. But like I said, this is like the meta build now, and you could also get slightly faster strafing speeds with the Raider stock if you really wanted to, but it's not going to help nowhere near as much as it did before. So there's not any other way you could build this to make this gun better. If you want to see a full TTK guide on the base weapon stats, I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video. We already covered all the SMGs in that video, but if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to leave a like. Also subscribe if you're new. We're trying to reach 50k, and thank you very much for watching.